Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Minds Hub. Thank you so much for joining us as we begin this amazing journey where we are going to have important conversations about childhood trauma, mental health in young people, as well as mental health in young athletes. So today I'm going to be talking to an amazing woman who is doing amazing things. She's a registered nurse, she's a psychotherapist, and she's also a founding director for Salowal Limited, which is a multi-award winning business. So come join me as I sit with Salome Mare-Walsh. Right. So hi Salome, how are you today?
Hi, Tsitsi. I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
That's good. I'm really well. I'm really well. It's good to see you after such a long time. And I just wanted to thank you for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. I know that you've got quite a lot of things going on and you're a busy woman, but I really appreciate you making time for this. So basically, what we are going to talk about today, we are going to talk about or focus on
Mhm.
childhood trauma and mental health in young people. So we want to hear your expertise in this area. Any advice that you can give? We just want to have a discussion about those things. So before we start, before we go into that, if you can just introduce yourself, what you do, and what Salome is about, so that people are aware.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and talking about mental health. So, my name is Salome Mare-Walsh, and I'm a registered nurse, a psychotherapist, and founder of Salowal, which is a health business that sort of supports people in a culturally sensitive manner.
Mhm.
So, I help adults work through relationship difficulties, trauma, and improve their well-being generally. But my interest in culturally sensitive or trauma-informed therapy is because with, I don't know, 20 years now of working in the NHS, I didn't really see that specific focus. And I think it's really important to see people holistically
Mhm.
because people's experiences are shaped by family, culture, race, migration, faith, community, and social expectations. So I really felt it's important that therapy understands the person within their context rather
Mhm.
than treating symptoms in isolation. So I mainly try to help adults understand their patterns that they formed. And I'm really big on self compassion. So not blaming ourselves for the difficulties that we have with mental health.
Yeah. Wow, that's really amazing. What I want to know is what made you decide that you want to go into this? What was the driving factor behind you doing this?
I don't know whether naturally, maybe I've always wanted to understand people and relationships, what makes people tick, what makes people do what they do.
Mhm.
But also, I don't know whether there was a natural affinity in people talking to me about their problems. So when I was doing my mental health nursing, I was lucky to have an experience in uh, what was it? It was therapeutic community. So there was nurses, there was psychologists. So that kind of tweaked my thinking about actually not just the medical model, but let's put some psychology models into mental health treatment, and the results are more effective, more lasting for people.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I've just been growing that, and then obviously the interest in culturally sensitive mental health support is because as a Black woman, I think I'm sure you you probably can relate to this. I
Mhm.
have experiences of not being seen fully or being understood fully. So it felt like a gap
Mhm.
in our normal services and in life normally. And
Mhm.
also being Zimbabwean, there's also cultural issues around actually how do people accept mental health or what we call someone not coping and all the
Mhm.
stigma stuff. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a bit later, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So thank you so much for explaining that. That's really helpful. So we're just going to dive into the topics that we wanted to talk about today. So talk to
Okay.
us about childhood trauma. What is childhood trauma? Because I understand that a lot of people hear this. but they don't really understand what it is and what it's about.
Mm.
Can you talk to us about that?
I suppose a good starting point is defining what trauma is. So,
Mm-hmm.
trauma is anything, any event or experience that someone can experience physically and
Mm-hmm.
psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
And it just means that that experience caused you to feel overwhelmed, caused you to feel not safe, it caused you to feel as though you couldn't cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it can be like from one incident, it can be from multiple incidents,
Yeah.
and it can also be from something missing in your life. Um, so that's the definition of trauma.
Okay. And
So,
how
sure.
does how does childhood trauma affect people in adult life? Because people find it very difficult to connect the two. Can you sort of
Yeah.
like talk to us about how childhood traumas and the things that we experience in childhood can affect our adult lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, childhood experiences that feel traumatic um, help us to form beliefs about ourselves, such
Mm,
as I'm not good enough, or I can't trust people, or I must be strong, or
mm,
even my needs don't matter. I must look after other people. So this
mm,
types of belief can cause you to have patterns of how you relate to yourself and others, which you will just carry as almost like a blueprint of how you are with people into adulthood. And although thinking, for example, um, I can't trust people might work in childhood, it might affect how you form relationships at work, personally as an adult, if that's a belief that you formed. So I could give an example maybe to make it come to life. So if a child consistently maybe hears their parents arguing, they might worry about who's going to come check on me or am I safe? So in adulthood, if they start hearing arguments or raised voices, they might already start to feel unsafe. They might shut down. And yet that argument might not be unsafe. They might not be at risk, but there's a sense that they feel at risk.
mm. Okay. Yeah, because I have noticed that um sometimes, in our adult lives, we may experience things that sometimes we may not know or fully understand where they are coming from
Yeah,
until maybe we sort of like read about these things about, childhood trauma. That's when, you have that light bulb moment and you're like, oh, I experienced this when I was a child.
yeah,
And now it's affecting you in adult life. So
yes.
can you talk to me about, or talk to the audience really about how some children seem to cope and some don't when it comes to these things? What is going
Yeah.
on?
Well, it's a number of things because I suppose we're all different. So the same experience or traumatic experience, uh, two different people can cope with it differently,
Yeah.
and that's okay. It's not a negative if someone can't cope. But how trauma affects us is that it affects our sleep. It affects physically. So sometimes people might have lots of digestive issues. Sometimes people might have unexplained physical symptoms,
Mm,
or in childhood, behavior can be like what one might call a naughty child. Like just sort of really misbehaving or sort of displaying a lot of distress.
mm,
So it's how someone, well, trauma is about impact, really, isn't it? It's like the impact of that experience on that person. So
mm,
obviously, impact is different for different people, but it's not about minimizing it, and
mm,
also it's not about saying, "Oh, well, it's not that bad," because sometimes that's what we start telling ourselves. Well, I think if I say this is what's happened to me, well, it's not that bad. So I should be able to cope. Um,
yeah.
then there's that experience where people still want to cope with things, and then it just compounds the amount of distress they're having, the amount of trauma they're having,
Mhm.
and it can really cause someone to have actual serious, severe mental health problems.
Exactly, yeah. One thing that I have noticed, I don't know, probably you have noticed it as well when we were growing up, that some of these things or some things that we've experienced in childhood, they're sort of like trivialized,
Yeah,
simple things. can happen to a child, and you will hear maybe a parent or an adult saying to you, "Oh, stop that! Why are you crying?" Things like that, and they shout, and they shout at the child,
Who's
and
already distressed. Yeah.
yeah. So I've noticed that a lot of things, especially in childhood, are trivialized by adults.
Yeah.
So do you think there is a connection? Because I feel like sometimes we are dealing with adults who are also going through whatever they're going through, like in terms of
Yeah.
childhood trauma, and then they tend to sort of like filter it down to the young people.
Of course, that's quite true. I mean, also, if we are talking about parents, right? There is no manual to be a parent,
Yeah.
and if there's no accessible support around managing your own mental health distress or recognizing your own trauma, and it's just something you try to live with. This is why sometimes trauma can be passed on. It can be passed on generationally, so there is intergenerational trauma. And if we think about our race as Black people as well, intergenerational trauma can be trauma coming from even as long ago as the slave trade. So the idea that you have to be strong or suppress your emotions, that there's nothing else but to keep going, that's something quite common even for us now, isn't it? Like as if we have no choice but to go
Yeah.
through those experiences. So if you're a parent and what you learned was if you were distressed, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to show it. That's what you know. So you can't teach your children anything else unless you've done the work and you're looking at it. And I'd like to stress that the most important thing isn't about feeling to blame as a parent, because the patterns that we fall in, actually, we're not at all responsible for them. If we look at our childhood, we can understand why we develop some of the patterns that we have of suppressing emotions or people pleasing or not saying when you're not feeling okay and just keeping going. So yeah, so it's more important to just support parents to be able to recognize the symptoms and then support their children.
Okay. Yeah,
Mm.
because that was going to be my next question. Like, how do parents, um, how do they get help so that they can help their children, or so that whatever it is that they went through doesn't affect their children? But
Yeah.
thank you so much for touching on that. So, what are the signs that parents need to look out for in their children, to recognize that their children are struggling with their mental health?
So things like intense shame,
Mhm.
things like low self-worth or low self-confidence. They
Mhm.
might also, children might experience anxiety, just being anxious at everything. They
Mhm.
might also have low mood.
Yeah.
There's also emotional numbness where they don't seem to have any display of emotion either way.
Mhm.
But also even a difficulty identifying feelings.
Mhm.
So where it seems like the feeling that they're displaying is incongruent with the situation.
Mhm.
And then strong reactions as well that seem out of proportion to the present situation. But I have to say, these things are also normal for children because children rely on their parents to understand their emotions, to name their emotions, to calm themselves down. So imagine that if you're a parent who has already got their own distress, you will
Yeah.
find it difficult to be able to be present, to calm your child down, and for them to learn about emotions. So
Mhm.
that's why, but it's possible to learn. That's the most important thing I want to say today. It's impossible. It's possible to learn, to change, and to kind of repair those, because this is relational trauma now that might be passed down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not hopeless. So the other things that might come up for children is the fear of rejection or
Yeah.
difficulty trusting,
Mhm.
or sometimes even staying in unhealthy relationships or friendships. You might be able to tell that, oh, this is not a good friendship, but your child isn't able to kind of extrapolate themselves from it. They might also avoid closeness, or they might be quite a perfectionist that you can see it's causing anxiety.
Mhm.
Other things include overworking, and then obviously substance misuse as well, self-sabotage, and other serious signs like self-harming, Perhaps not eating or some eating difficulties can also be signs. But then, as I said, trauma is physically what happens and psychologically. So physically, you might notice a child might have disrupted sleep. They might complain of kind of pains and aches all the time. You might take them to the doctor and they might say, oh, there's nothing. But they'll be feeling maybe headaches or digestive problems. They might have some pain that's unexplained, or even feeling really tired as well, so fatigue. But constantly on edge or shutting down is also another sign, especially during conflict. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that mental health issues in young people, so we are now talking about probably teens and young adults, do you think it's something that can just come up from nowhere without experiencing any childhood trauma?
Yes, for some people it can, because biologically, sometimes if there's a family history of mental illness, sometimes that can be the reason. However, there's a lot of things going on in our lives that can cause trauma. And remember what I said, that it doesn't have to be the same for everyone. And the most important thing isn't to say, why are you behaving like this? It's like, what's happening for you, and trying to understand what's happening for that child. And it's not always also very clear to think about the source. So if you ask a child if they can't even say what emotions they're feeling, how would they tell you where it's coming from? Sometimes it isn't more and more obvious trauma. Sometimes I'll give you an example, I suppose. If a parent is, providing everything, food, shelter, clothing, schooling, maybe what might be missing for that child might be connection, so emotional connection. So it isn't a case of that they might know that that's what's missing. But I just want to say, any child displaying these emotions doesn't automatically mean that they have trauma. So children are growing, experiencing different emotions. Their hormones, especially as teenagers, are raging, and they're changing, and they have their peers to worry about and their school to worry about. So sometimes it's not always about that someone's experiencing trauma. It might be just part of the growing process.
And do you feel like, especially when children are growing up, like they are going into their teens, and we know what that's like, you feel like parents sometimes, the way they handle their child when they're during those years, the formative years, when they're, the hormones are raging, and it can affect their mental health when they grow up?
I mean, everything, do you know what? As a parent myself, I know like parents have parent guilt. We have mommy's guilt or daddy's guilt, and especially if you're self-aware and trying to do the work on yourself, on your mental health, on your relationships, you know that it's not easy. The most important thing that children need is something that is good enough. So if you have handled the situation not very well, it's modeling with your child how to do that reparation, how to come back, how to check in on them, even things like apologizing and seeing how you can move forward. That makes that child feel that there is connection, that there is still safety. And actually, the most important thing isn't about being a perfect parent, because that also causes anxiety in children. It's just about doing a good enough job at raising your children. And even because we are, as parents, we are also human, we can feel intense emotions as well. And you have all the stress of the world, isn't it? Working, being at home, managing the home life, managing those teenage hormones, and keeping your children safe. There's so much going on. Even in the world, there's so much going on, isn't that can make us worry as parents. So yes, the most important thing is them knowing that at the end of the day, some things can be talked about, understood, and those things that can't be resolved, that you can find a way to pull through together, like a unit, isn't it? That's what we want, a family unit. Yeah.
You mentioned something that always been on my mind about apologizing. And apologizing to your children. Oh my goodness. I think that is something that I would say most of our African people struggle with.
You know what? It's not even just African. I have worked with lots and lots and lots of different adults, parents, children. Some
Mm,
people would rather do a nice gift gesture or spend money or
mm.
just act like it's okay. It's now resolved. It's water under the bridge.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Um, and there is no wrong or right way. So what I'm talking about here is reparation. So if you think about when you have a fallout with a friend or a sibling, if you don't talk and kind of understand what went wrong, then each person can hold their perspective. And of course, there's also a power imbalance between a parent and a child.
Mm,
So, it's really difficult. I can understand that. And you can see the power imbalance even in other relationships, teacher, pupil,
mm,
and then you grow up and you've got a boss and you're an employee. So um, it's very hard generally, I think, for people to own up. But talking is so, so important. And you might find actually that you are on the same page. You actually might be sharing the same values.
yeah.
Um, and then you kind of keep going along together in a way that you understand each other. So I think people need to find their own ways of repairing relationships.
Because I've realized that an apology, as much as it's very difficult for people to say I'm sorry or I made a mistake there,
Yeah.
it's something that heals a lot of things. There is
Yeah.
something that an apology does, a genuine apology, not just an
Yes.
apology for saying words and you keep doing the same thing or whatever. But a
Yeah.
genuine apology heals a lot of things. And I've also realized that sometimes when it's hard to say I'm
Mm.
sorry,
Yeah.
like you said, it's important to talk about things because in
Yes.
that conversation, you can sit down with someone and say, "This is why I behaved the way I did." You can kind of like explain
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think that's important to have those conversations, especially if someone cannot say sorry?
I think that it is, and it's not always necessary to be a direct conversation. I think children are creative. They might like to write things down. They might like to draw or watch a film, or I don't know. But also culturally, I think we have that understanding that you can speak to aunties or uncles or who can be almost like mediators, and children do need that. They
Mm-hmm.
need consistency in terms of an adult who listens, who believes, and who reassures. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's a problem between the main, or you should say the caregiver, it could
Mm-hmm.
be a parent, it could be an auntie or an uncle or grandmother or grandfather, whoever that is. If you're modeling that consistency, that okay, actually, maybe I was too angry that I overreacted because anyone can do that, adult or child. It just helps to make that child feel they are important, they matter,
Mm-hmm.
and that things can always be resolved. So it helps them to know that things are never as bad as that. So that trauma that we're talking about will be mitigated for later, more adult challenging difficulties that they might have relationally or otherwise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for that, Salome. So my next question is, what are some of the biggest mental health challenges that are being faced by young people in this day and age?
Um, I don't know whether I think there's so many things. I think I was
Yeah,
just talking to a colleague of mine. I was like, oh, well, it'll be my. Okay, so at the moment, my kids' school said, oh, they're gonna stop kids having mobile phones in the school. So my daughter's like, Mom, what did you do when you were my age in school, in high school? So I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, played sports, hang out with friends,
Mhm.
did things, clubs like art or dance, or uh, there was so much activity. So
Yeah.
now there's a lot of reliance, I think, for children on um, digital tools or a digital way of engaging,
Mhm.
which can reduce their skills in terms of connecting with others or forming relationships. So that can now feel quite scary, maybe even traumatic. If you said there's no gadgets, go and play. For some, it might be challenging. So so yeah, I think there might be, I don't know, there might be a sense of loss of connection with that. So this is why there's lots of research around how to stay connected in the family, because that's where it starts, isn't it? How do you still have gadgets and things like AI and all that kind of stuff, but stay connected in a human way with each other? And culturally, we have things like faith, that helps you to stay connected. Um, I don't know. I don't know. There was I don't know what other challenges young people are facing in a general sense, or I don't know. Maybe you can be specific with your question. It's just one of them. Yeah.
There's also things like we'll come back to the gadgets, the mobile phones and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's also things like drugs and alcohol
Yes.
that
Yeah.
affect young people. How do you think we can address that? Because it seems like it's like out of control now.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I suppose these days there's young people exposed to a lot of information that maybe they would have been protected from had communications not been as freely available as they are now with social media and peers. But for young people, I know this is probably a global phenomenon in terms of difficulty with finding occupation or jobs post school. Um, so that can cause people to feel quite disheartened. But the fight against drugs and substance misuse is an ongoing one. It really is an ongoing one. I suppose as a society, we probably still need to remain mindful in terms of, again, blaming the young person that why are you taking drugs is looking at what's happened. So if you think about it, we're talking about trauma, right? Most of the times that people turn to alcohol or drugs is usually, more often than not, is to cope with something emotionally difficult.
Right.
So we need to find out what is going on for our young people and support them. I think support is always the best as opposed to blaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you feel like it's mostly when people get into young people get into drugs and alcohol, it's mostly to deal with some emotional things that they're trying to deal with, or it can be influence as well.
Oh,
So,
influence is 100% involved in that. But if someone, yeah, so people can do it for experimentation reasons. For example, curiosity is one of our basic emotions, and it's important for us to acknowledge that and maintain that. So when kids are curious, that's why we have to be nurturing in our responses, but and supportive. However, there is information available around the dangers of drugs. So besides influence, I think it's not always, I suppose, what's missing is, as I mentioned before, the ability to connect with other people can feel like a psychic pain that people are going through. So yes, influence is really important to peer pressure and things like that. And actually, maybe the fact that it looks cool, I don't know, in movies or in songs or videos or something like that, where people see people they admire doing some of these behaviors. So yeah, it's not a very easy thing to prevent, but hopefully, I there is something really important though about our young people these days. They are a lot more aware because they've got much more information earlier. So they do have a certain wisdom. And I think what we would want is to give them all the information they need so they can make wise, good, sound decisions for themselves based on the values that they've been instilled by their adults around them and the communities around them. So if we still have those supportive communities, I think it can help to mitigate some of the substance misuse that we see. But I think communities are sort of breaking down a little bit. It's not communities are not as close knit as they used to be.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. And why do you think that is? Because I remember when we were growing up, community was everything.
Quite common to find people having two jobs or more to support their family. So that removes the time, reduces the time available for that community engagement.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And how important do you feel like the family structure has to be to support our young children? Because it seems like everything is really connected to home, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
with the phones that we were talking about, like the gadgets, laptops, and it's everywhere now. And we find that in the home, even the parents themselves, they're struggling with that addiction as well of being on the phone
We
all
are
the
all on social media. We are, in fact, you have to be. Like, but we're doing it now.
Exactly. Yeah, and say, okay, let's have a family walk, down the park or something like
Yes.
that, you know, and everyone is on their phones walking.
It-
Like, so what's the point of this?
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think, well, it's true. It's true. I think, first of all, the connection is in talking, is in how someone makes you feel, right? So, yes, you could be a parent who has to work a lot or is not there a lot, but you have to make sure that there is that quality time when you are there or build it in,
Mhm.
because I think adults can't take for granted the relationship with the children.
Yeah.
And relationships require time, they
Yeah.
require engagement, and so they need feeding, watering, sunlight, all that good stuff. So I think maybe sometimes as adults we take it for granted that children should be there. They should know that this is their parents or this is their grandparents. Um, and even I have memories of being forced to show affection to people, but that doesn't build relationships. So what builds relationship is that connection, which is building time, having understanding, having consistency, even things like naming emotions, avoiding shaming. When a child makes a mistake, because that's the whole idea. Childhood is about growing and learning. Um,
Mhm.
Keeping routines predictable as well. And another important thing is explaining family changes in an
Mhm.
age appropriate language, because sometimes things happen and the one least thought of is the child.
Mhm.
But if there's family events, it affects everyone, including children.
Mhm.
So another important thing maybe is to seek support. There
Mhm.
is nowhere where it's written that parents should know everything about everything to do with
Yeah.
their children. So seeking support when behavior changes or there's persistent changes is so important.
Okay.
Um, and also another important thing is not allowing or making children responsible
Yeah.
for adult emotional needs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know how I can say this. Let me think of a really good example. I don't know if I can't think of a really good example right now, but the way you say you make reparations or apologize, right? If you don't, that means that child learns that they shouldn't expect that from you. So they
Mhm.
might withhold their own emotions or own difficulties if they think they're going to make you sad as a parent, it's going to make you angry as a parent. So
Mhm.
that's another way that, you know, as adults, we can make children responsible for adult emotions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Now
I
back.
have to say though, sorry,
Go
because
ahead.
I focus on cultural sensitivity. When we're talking about communities and the impact of, I mean, I have to point out that, like, right now, society is very, very polarized. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of othering of anyone who's black or brown skinned.
Mhm.
So that affects how people build as communities. It's so almost like intolerance of another person. And it's not, I can say it's not just happening, it's happening worldwide. You see what we see in South Africa, we see it in the UK, look at what's happening. There's so many countries that are in conflict just because of the issues of difference or where someone's coming from or their skin color or their religion. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of suspicion out there. So if we
Yeah.
think about that, that's we cannot escape it in our small macro communities. It exists as well.
Okay, thank you so much for shedding light on that. So now coming back to the childhood trauma, how important do you feel early intervention is? Because this is the whole purpose of this, of what we are doing at the moment. Because I strongly believe that early intervention can help so much, especially when these young children grow up, in terms of their mental health. If they get support in early childhood, it will be able to sort of like just mitigate a lot of things that can happen in adulthood. How do you think early intervention is important?
I think it's really good that I feel like with maybe podcasts like this and with a lot of growth in information available around mental health and supporting people, is teaching us that we need to be a bit more curious and explore. So exploring what's happening isn't, for the children, isn't automatically about accusing parents. It's not to say parents are not doing a good job or anything like that. Sometimes I think, if I think culturally, it almost looks like anything that is bad or that causes that's a negative causes a negative impression of the family, but it's not always about that, really. I think we have to understand that behavior often communicates something, whether it's in adults or children. Difficult behavior may be an attempt to stay connected, to feel safe, to be seen. It might be a way to relieve some distress. It might be a way to gain control over something. So asking what the behavior is protecting or showing and create more compassionate conversations is really, really, really important. And regardless of what's happened in terms of traumatic events in childhood or adulthood, it's really important for people to understand that healing is possible. There's so many modalities of therapy. I mean, you can start to heal trauma as inside your family, but you can also seek help from mental health professionals. And people can develop healthier relationships, emotion regulation, and self-compassion, and new ways of responding as well. So,
All right. So we are almost there. We are almost about to finish. But I've got this one question about our African communities. How do you think mental health can be mental health education can be sort of given or taught in our African communities? I know there are so many mental health programs that are out there that are there in Africa. There's still that stigma about mental health. I don't know why people always think when you say mental health, it's something to do with someone who's crazy or someone who's, mentally not okay. So how do you think this information or this can be communicated in our African communities?
I think we have to know that, for example, thinking about the psyche in that way is a Western way of thinking. The origins of even psychotherapy, psychology is white middle class. So sometimes people don't have the language to say what it is. So all they know is mental health. And we talked about trauma. I talked about intergenerational trauma, and I mentioned slave trade, right? So this is where it's coming from. Why would we expect our Black and brown African brothers and sisters to just readily accept that? So we have to, as mental health professionals, I think we need to remain compassionate and understanding the reasons why some of it might be rejected. It's because of the source. Also, secondly, the language might not mean anything for people. And we have to meet people where they are. So if people would rather say, I'm having lots of digestive problems, I'm having lots of headaches, instead of I'm stressed or I'm anxious, then that's okay. I think if we start to talk to people in the way that makes sense to them, which is what we do in cognitive analytic therapy. It's a relational therapy that also looks at relational trauma But we always use the client's words, how they describe things. We use metaphors, we use pictures, whatever makes sense to the client so that they can understand themselves better. And when you understand what the issues are, then you can resolve it. But it starts with that, with recognizing the difference and the challenge. And part of why so I didn't say that, but I'm a part-time guest lecturer at the University of Liverpool, and I teach on inclusion and intersectionality in the therapy room, because it isn't something that we can't expect everyone to know what that is and what that looks like. But I think if we start with compassion, start with understanding that people are hugely different. So even though we're saying Africa, Africa is a huge continent with lots of different cultures, languages, systems, and way of organizing. The other thing I love respecting is people's religious beliefs, those cultural beliefs. So if that feels important to somebody, then it's important to recognize that and encourage those. So some ways people support themselves mentally might be really positive. So I'd say going to church every Sunday might be really, really important for somebody. So you have to encourage the positive ways of coping that people already have. And that's within their normal customs and culture.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for that. One thing that I've noticed is that, well, I did a launch in Zimbabwe last year where we
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I realized how important it was to talk about mental health. And like you said, that we need to sort of like talk about it or communicate it in a way that people understand. Yeah. You can't take, things that are Western and put it in the African community and expect them to get it immediately and understand it immediately. You have to meet people where they are and sort of like just break it down really. And I was really encouraged to see that a lot of these teachers and headmasters and they are really willing to learn how they can support the young people in terms of mental health. And that shows you that it is there, but sometimes maybe people may not know how to communicate it or how to support these young people when it comes to mental health. So I think that's really important. As we finish,
well done for doing that. That's like, it's so important. Like, you're just skimming over it, but I just want to sit with that for a minute.
No, go ahead. You can say
because I think it's really important to, if we're gonna, because children are the future, right? And actually, no one really teaches you about these things. No one teaches you about emotions, relationships. So if you're starting with the teachers and head teachers are interested and the children are interested and they're eager to learn and it's there, that's the prime time to be doing it. So I just want to say well done for doing that.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. That's very encouraging. So just one more thing as well that I notice is that when we are communicating these issues about mental health, especially in schools and with adults or parents, whatever, I noticed that a lot of our adults in these spaces, they are also struggling with their own mental health.
Yes.
So it becomes very difficult for them to sort of like communicate those any issues about mental health when they are also struggling with their own demons, So I think it's very important for us as professionals to make sure that in these spaces, the people who are looking after our children, they are looking after our children most of the time. We are at work and they're at school most of the time. They are also well taken care of in terms of their mental health, their well-being. Just sometimes all it takes is sitting down with someone and asking, "Are you okay?"
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
Tell you that, I've been struggling with this for so long, and they don't have anyone to tell about that. So I think it's important for those issues to be discussed and with our teachers, headmasters, school representatives, advocates, and things like that. To ensure that they themselves, they're equipped, they're taken care of emotionally, their emotional well-being is supported as well, so that it doesn't trickle down to our young people. Because
Yes.
I can remember, like, when we were in primary school, I can tell you that, oh, teacher so and so used to beat us up so much. And the
Oh,
way he would do it or she would do it, you could tell. And now when I look at it, I
yeah.
can tell that they had issues, because there is no way you would spank a child like that and
Yeah.
it's okay, you know?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people in their adult lives, they're struggling so much with
Yes.
their mental health, that I feel they really need to be supported before they can even support our young children.
In our nursing profession, we get supervision, don't we? And
Yeah.
in all mental health professions, you get reflective practice, you get supervision, you get supported. So
Mm.
definitely, in order to continue that work of supporting others, we need to do, um, some CPD. Just keeping on top of our own learning, but also reflecting on our own behaviors and what was difficult and what we could do better.
Mm.
Um, since last year at Salowal, I've been going into organizations and talking to people about, maybe it depends on what they want, but essentially stuff to do with resilience or checking in with the staff's mental health. And I can tell you that most of the places I go, there is someone on that day who's really quite distressed,
Yeah.
because it isn't just about work, it's all the facets of life,
Mm.
relationships, sickness, being a carer,
Mm.
having children who are unwell, or financial problems, personal health problems. So, and even childhood trauma that people haven't addressed is still kind of causing problems.
Mm.
So I think it's something I don't underestimate, that we people need that kind of stuff. And so it's up to employers, I suppose, at the minute,
Yeah.
if they want to do something for their staff. There's definitely lots of places they can do that. Definitely with us, because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, because you cannot expect people to be in work and be functional when they have
Mm.
all these stresses going on from home, from just a wider life, all the aspects of their lives. So
Mm.
but if you if you need any help with that, I'll be happy to come and
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah,
I'll stay in touch with you so that we
yeah,
can continue talking about this and discussing and seeing how we can support our communities. So,
yeah.
what's your advice to parents, or to, you know, teachers or people who are in leadership positions who are supporting our children? What's your advice to them as we close?
Okay, so maybe staying curious, because that's one thing I think we tend to lose because of the hardship of life. We don't have time to sit and reflect and be curious.
Oh, I can't hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. I think it ran out of battery.
Absolutely.
I think instead of thinking what's wrong with this child, adults could be asking, what's this child maybe communicating? What might be going on for them?
Mhm.
And staying curious about that. And not just being ready to punish someone because they've gone out of their normal expectations, but having compassion.
Mhm.
And even, that saying that says it takes a village to raise
Yeah.
a child. So sometimes people need to have another allocated, trusted person that they can refer to. And that's why probably in schools you have different teachers with different roles. You might have some who do that pastoral care to check in with the children, who might have counseling skills.
Yeah.
So we need some of that as well. But if parents are struggling, I think early intervention, we talked about it. Uh, all the symptoms I mentioned before doesn't mean someone has a
Mhm.
diagnosable mental health issues. It doesn't mean always that you have to go to professionals, but just, of
Mhm.
course, being as kind and as attentive and as supportive as you can.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and just what's the last thing I can say then? What I've been saying, I suppose, which is we can learn to relate better,
Mhm.
to even alter those core beliefs that we hold about ourselves and the patterns of behaving that we end up engaging in.
Mhm.
And so we just have to notice them, speak
Mhm.
about them, seek support as early as we can, and start the healing journey, which might not be possible if you're doing it alone. But yeah, there's other people who can help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Salome. Thank you so much for the information that you've given
Thanks
to
for
us.
having
It's
me.
really important, and I feel like this is a topic that we have to continuously talk about because it's an
Yes.
ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Sure, now we can see that from even from when we were young, this is something that is a continuous thing. It's an ongoing thing that we have to continuously talk about. So thank you so
Yes.
for your input. Thank you for your expertise in this area. Is there anywhere where people can reach you in terms of your business, where
Yeah.
people can like, get in touch if they need support, things like that?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. So salowal.com, so SALOWAL.com is where you can, if you go on there, there'll be some resources that you can access, but also you can make an appointment to just have a chat with me and one of my colleagues. We want to help everyone improve their mental health and just change things for the next generation. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
And hopefully I will we will maintain contact and
Oh,
you can
100%.
okay.